I
gosh.
looked and I was like, I
Oh
wonder how far we're in, and
no.
so this will be a funny one.
So tragic.
It's all right. It could have been a lot worse, and we could have went through the entire episode.
Hey, welcome to the Chosen Companion series. If you're wondering why we're laughing, it's because we just recorded, well, thought we were recording for approximately 20 minutes or so, and realized that I actually didn't push record.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yep.
we literally talked as if we were recording for like 20 minutes and didn't record a single thing. So here we are.
Shalom.
Shalom. My name's Mike from Showboys Podcast. You think this is my first ever time podcasting?
And
And
my
I'm
name's
joined with,
James.
yes, my friend James over here, who is so kind to ask me if I actually hit record.
It was a rhetorical question. I saw the big red button not lit in big red. So, yeah.
But yes, James of the nerdybible.com. We're both, to summarize, we're having a Monday. It was a week, and now we're here and we're recording our episode for season 2, episode 1, the episode titled Thunder of The Chosen, which was released about a little over a year after season 1 ended. And if you didn't know, I didn't start watching The Chosen until probably early 2022. So just recapping all the stuff that we had a great conversation about before. But yeah, here's the episode summary. And if I don't read this like 100% perfectly, like shame on me because I had a practice run.
Yeah.
So this should be great.
That's what the gospel's all about, shame, right?
Yeah, exactly. During Shiva, the martyred Big James. Can you get through the first 4 words that I messed up? During Shiva for the martyred Big James in 44 AD, John interviews fellow disciples as he writes their eyewitness accounts for his book. In Sychar, 26 AD, Big James and John plow a field while Jesus continues to teach the Samaritans. Thomas and Rama arrive and join the group. Tension builds among the disciples as they wrestle with the increasing fame of Jesus in Samaria. Rama's father expresses his unbelief in Jesus and leaves, blessing his daughter. Jesus and his students have dinner with Melek, a former robber now crippled. In the morning, Melek is healed. Big James and John assume leadership roles, but the other disciples oppose their presumptions. When James and John try to present their plans to Jesus, a group of Samaritans shows extreme hostility towards them. James and John ask Jesus to rain fire to destroy the Samaritans. Jesus rebukes James and John for their prejudice. After the near-violent encounter, Jesus gives them a new nickname, the Sons of Thunder. Invited to a synagogue to read a scroll of Moses, Jesus reads the first scroll of Genesis in 44 AD. John reminisces it and writes the introduction for his book. Third time's charm.
Yep. That was a long summary.
Yeah, so so what'd you think about this the opening of this episode?
It's hard. It's hard to go. So I loved the introduction. So yeah, I know, right? Well, because it's like a reminiscing of you know,
a retelling of past experiences, kind of like
Yeah,
what we're
and
doing right
yeah,
now.
right now it's hard to like wait, I already said this. No, I didn't. All right. So no, what I really liked about it, it's like, in season one you saw Matthew writing in a tablet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think those little tablets or little notes and stuff are probably more likely of what they did randomly. So like they're sitting down at like an older age, wiser, you know, more knowledgeable on what who Jesus actually was. And they're
Yeah.
like collecting these ideas into this one point, this one book, and each of them does it their own creative way. I mean, I have a lot of writings, I have a lot of different things, and like they're just in notes and papers and notebooks, and then when I sit down to like take these ideas and collect it into one thing, it's like you almost think back like what it was like when you were writing it. And so I imagine them looking back at these notes and being like, you know, oh, like he said this, and like this is what it actually probably meant, and like almost like a giddy, like you're
Yeah.
you're coming to new realizations that you didn't before. So I really like it. It's almost like emotional form. I think the actors did great. I loved this beginning intro though. It's like nostalgia.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like we have talked about on previous episodes. I love the little ways that they've tackled the writing of like the New Testament and stuff, from Matthew and John jotting stuff down.
Mhm.
Jesus referencing, like, Matthew having a tablet, take notes or whatever, or John. Um, it was John sitting on the stairs, right?
Listening to
Yeah, Jesus
Nicodemus
and
and
Nicodemus
Jesus.
is meeting, and he's like writing down what was being said, which is awesome. But this is a really cool moment of him just like compiling all the notes of all their testimonies and stuff, and acted very, very well across the board. I mean, loved seeing the emotion as the disciples are recalling these stories of like when they first met Jesus and stuff like that. Like everyone's like eyes are watering if they're not like actually crying already, which is cool. It just kind of shows like the power and the weight of those
Mhm.
moments, right? Um, and it's cool to see, like, a flash into the future. Like you said, they're wiser, they look older, like Simon's salt and peppered, Matthew's got the huge beard, they all look like they've aged. um but like it's cool, uh also from like a cinematography or like theatrical point of view. Just this is kind of like the first step. Well, it is like literally the first scene of the second season, but it's like one of many attempts that they take to up the production of these episodes to kind
Mhm.
of step into that more theatrical presentation. Even though it's the second time talking about this, I'm still struggling describing what I'm trying to talk about. But it's like they're kind of toying, like stepping into the artsy side of like
Mhm.
doing cool like film things. Um, we'll see in a couple episodes. My favorite, of course, uh, thing that they do. But this is a cool thing. I always love it when we have like um, a look into the future, and then we're
Mhm.
brought back into the present day, which is what happens here. Um, were
I
you gonna
think
say
it's
something?
well, yeah. I'm reflecting now on this, and I think it's a really deep intro if you really think about it and like listen to what they're doing, because it's in response to Big James
Hmm.
being martyred, right?
Yeah,
And
I think at
so,
one point, Mary, Jesus's mother, is like, we should be like out at, or why are we doing this during Shiva, which I don't even know what that is. I want, maybe that's the name of the thing that's happening for Big James. I'm not sure. Uh, but John's responsible. Well, this is what Big James would have wanted, right? We're all here in one place. finally like reunited. We don't know when or if this will ever happen again. So
That
cool.
yeah, I mean, I feel like too they're probably like, well, Jesus got martyred, pretty much. I mean, now they're getting martyred. Like, I could be next, and I think it's like there's like a understanding what could very well be ahead of you very soon. So
Shiva, by the way, is the week-long mourning period in Judaism for first-degree relatives. So that would be what they're talking about there. But yeah, it's a great intro, a great look at how these books were written, and a cool, fun way to start a season, right? After this, we're snapped back into the present day, where Big James and John are out like manually hand plowing this field with just bunch of sticks and carts with pointy things on the bottom, weighed down by rocks. That would suck. Like, that is some hard physical labor. And they're just like out there playing a game of Would You Rather, basically. Like, at one point, I think John says he'd rather wrestle a swordfish or whatever. He's like, you realize they have a sword on their face, right?
Oh, man.
But they're out there. Jesus apparently had given them this task, and they're feeling good about themselves. Like, yeah, man, this must be really important if Jesus is having us do this. And on top of that, they're also like, and we don't have to like be in that filthy Samaritan town surrounded by all those Samaritans.
Yep. No, yeah, I love how they just kind of are. It's almost like the way that they assume Jesus is telling them to do this for a specific reason. Like, I don't know.
They're out there trying, like, wondering like what they're doing it for, and they're like, I don't know. He said something about like this would feed generations or something. Like, oh, maybe just for travelers or whatever. And he mockingly quotes Jesus from season 1 about like, hospitality isn't always for those who have homes or something along those lines, which I think is a reference to when he asks why they're chopping so much firewood or something when they're going to leave camp the next day or something like that. But then we go from there into the town, the place where apparently Jesus and the disciples are staying, and nobody can find Jesus. And the disciples are, the scene starts like Simon comes in. He's like, yeah, there's like this many people out in the square, and they're getting some more, and everyone's real excited to hear Jesus preach again. He's been preaching all day. And another one's like, well, isn't he tired by now because he's been preaching all day? Like, maybe he should rest. And Andrew's like, just get him some water, and I'll go get him and tell him. And he goes to where Jesus would be resting, and he's not there. So everyone's kind of like, where the heck is Jesus? And they kind of like split up into groups to go find him. Of course, as we'll see throughout the season, Matthew's just kind of like treated like a big turd, and they just Simon tells him to stay, and everything's a competition at this point with the disciples. Matthew like quips as they all leave, like, well, I'm probably the most likely to find him because he's gonna come back here eventually, right? So I'll just have better odds staying in the place that he'll return to. But this is kind of like a glimpse into basically the result of the episode where he tells Fotina at the well, like that where he reveals himself, right? That picks up pretty much from the finale of him publicly revealing himself and her going to tell everyone in the town of what Jesus had done. And now they're in the town and people are coming to see and hear from Jesus himself. What'd you kind of think about that? This whole transition from the intro into the episode here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I mean, this was probably, where do we end then here? Just like with the scene of what we were talking about.
Yeah, they all kind of leave to go find him, and Matthew's just kind of chilling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's where I was thinking about this. And so you mean Matthew's sitting at the town, and Thomas and them are coming in, right? Or was it Thomas?
Yeah, that happens next. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so that's the next part. Sorry, I was thinking about the counting tool Matthew was using, and I got so.
Yes, I do love that.
I like nerded out because it's called an abacus, and I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
That's why I am the way I am right now.
Yeah, the whole time they're talking about this, Matthew's like trying to calculate like how many people they'd have to like preach to each day they're there to reach the entire population of this town. And he's like, that would mean like we would need to reach 83.333333. I do love it. He's just sitting there. He's got his little
the abacus. But yeah, that's I mean I like it. I think it continues. Well, I like that Jesus is working on somebody's cart.
Yes.
You know,
like and here it's like
they lost him for a whole day, and he's like
just under a car. Like it's even like jacked up on some rocks on one side, and
it's and there he is under it, just fixing it and doing his Jesus thing, and helping a Samaritan. Yeah, I don't know. I think this is just a good little introduction to the town, and I think they reference it later, like you lost him for a whole day, and like it's just it's like it shines light on the perspective that they have. Like Jesus is off around town, just helping people fix things and meeting people and this and that, and there they are, like bouncers and like almost like
parents looking for their toddler.
Yeah, almost like and that are like
you were supposed to watch Jesus.
Yeah. Or like they're the shepherds and Jesus is the sheep, that type of thing. And it's like it's just funny. I think I've said it in past episodes. I just really like how the characters are walking around, just the way that they respond of just being so clueless all the time and just so nearsighted.
Yeah, not aware of the gravity of the situation.
Yeah, even in the later he talks about the kingdom and they're all just enthralled, like they've never thought deeply about what he's actually preaching. They're just so focused on this nearsighted thing that they just can't see past their own hand.
Yeah. After this, like before they find Jesus, but after we see he's being good old Jesus helping out the Samaritan on his wagon there, just tightening that rope or whatever. for that axle. I just so love the image though. It's like it's literally like it's on a jack.
Yeah.
And he might as well just have one of those like rolly bench things that like, you know, you slide under the car. Anyways.
Well, that and like, did it really need to be jacked up?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I don't think it did. I think it's yeah. So that's funny.
Yeah, it's great. But yeah, Thomas and Rama, they come. Well, before they get there, we get a short scene with Thomas and Rama like trying to find their way to Sychar, which is where Jesus told Thomas to meet him after the wedding, before he left the wedding. And they're like looking at the map, trying to figure out which way to go on this fork. And Rama's father's traveling with them, and he's like not exactly pleased to be making this journey. He thinks that they're throwing their future away, right? They restored the reputation of the business, right? And like now they're just giving it up to go follow some dude they just met in Samaria of all places, which is just despised by the Jews, right? So fast forward, they come knocking on the place that Jesus and the disciples are staying, and who is there to answer? The one and only Matthew. So we get some comical awkwardness here. And he like opens the door and he's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "Who are you?" I forget exactly what the interaction is, but it's super awkward. And Matthew's like, "All right, well, I'll shut the door."
Bye.
And he's like, wait, is Jesus there? Or something along those lines. Mary Magdalene, thankfully, is arriving at the same time, so she saves the situation, invites him in, and Thomas says something about Matthew being rude, and Matthew's like, you come to a stranger's house and say you don't know who they are or something, and I'm the one that's being rude.
He answers, he's like, "Shalom." The guy's like, "Shalom," and Matthew's like, just kind of staring at him, and he's like, "I don't know you. Maybe you're in the wrong place," and shuts the door. He's like, "We're looking for Jesus," and he's like, "Well, everyone is," and then shuts the door again. Yeah. Oh, it's just too funny because he's just so awkward.
Oh man, yeah. So Thomas, Rama, and her father arrive. They're here now, waiting on Jesus to return, just like everyone else. When Jesus does finally return, he welcomes Thomas and Rama, talks to her father, who wants to have a more serious conversation with Jesus about what's going on. Basically tell him like, yeah, I think they're doing something really dumb, but you helped us out, so I'm just going to let them go, apparently. Jesus has the group. Well, first he tells everyone like, "Oh yeah, I got to go thank these two servants for doing a great work today."
Yes.
And of course, Simon's like, "What is it, Simon?" He's like, "I'll escort you."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Okay." And he walks like 3 feet into the next room. And he's like, "We're here." And he goes and thanks John and Big James for sowing the seed.
Yeah. And before this, when Jesus was missing, this is where we got they stumbled upon him in the town, and he was teaching, and he was doing the lost sheep parable. And so I thought that was a good one. I think they did pretty good in that scene. He's like, "Is there any shepherds here?" Like it's this dude. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like some magic thing or something that's on the, like, "Do we have any blah 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 in the audience?" But
do you want to kind of go through that whole scene there with that
Yeah,
parable, because it's actually an important part of the episode that I totally glossed over and forgot about.
yeah. I think I would say this is the theme of the episode. Really, like and we'll get it into. We're gonna probably, I think, actually start that character arc here in a minute. I think we're pretty close to it, but he's talking to a big crowd of people in Samaria here, and he's asking, so are there any shepherds in the crowd? And the guy speaks up, I'm a shepherd. And so he does the Socratic method here. So he's asking,
Like,
huh?
just the dude totally looks like he would be a shepherd. He's just like crazy hair. He's got the staff. He's got like the big scarf.
Yeah, I think they made him
Yep,
pretty
okay.
hippie. Like
Yeah,
he does
exactly.
I'm looking at it right now, and I think he's a little out of place. He almost does
Like, yeah, I'm a shepherd, man.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's the hat that does it for me. All right. So
I had to get a funny moment in since we missed my amazing joke about Matthew. And
you did.
you just gotta get through this first. That was gold, and it didn't get recorded.
It was. Well, you learn. So he he's using the Socratic method and just kind of asking him like, so imagine you have 100 sheep, and one of them goes awry. What would you do? And he's like, well, I'd go after the sheep, and so he said, okay. And he's like, well, what would you do when you find it? Would you just leave the 99 other there? And he said, yes, I would leave the 99 to go for the one sheep. And he'd find the sheep, he'd put him over his shoulders, he'd walk him back, and he said I can't remember how he put it, but he did like and probably do a little dance.
Yeah.
Thinking like that he's joyous that he found the sheep, that he's bringing the sheep back. And so Jesus is like, and I would rejoice with my lost sheep. And so what he's saying is that how did he, I mean, it's the quote is, let's see here. What does he actually say? He said, the kingdom of heaven would rejoice over one sinner that repents, over the 99 that have not need, that have already, repented or are already righteous or whatever, you want to say. But I don't know. I mean, I think that's I mean, I don't know if this is probably one of the stories that, like, if you know it, that type of thing. And if you've heard it, you've definitely heard it. And so, but I think it's a good one, especially in this context of the story, because we start to be introduced to this character that I would say in Jesus's parable here is the lost sheep that has gone awry.
Yeah, and you can see it like almost literally as the episode plays out, because you see him preaching to these big crowds, and you hear reference of like the size of the crowds he's preaching to already in Samaria at this time, and he literally leaves Samaria.
No,
to go and have a meal and bless this one guy. So it's like he's figuratively leaving the 99 or hundreds in the city that he's reaching for the one. And it's just
what does he do? What does he do after everything? He brings him back. So that's good. That's
brings
good.
him back in the temple.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, so let's talk about
episode
Melech.
Over. No.
Yeah, exactly. No, thanks for joining us. Yeah. Man, the episode would have been twice as long if we would have recorded at the start.
No, I really like this though, because I mean, it's just, I think it's, I like that overall theme of this, because it's, I mean, I feel like most people that are in this position, or at least, I mean, I want to say called to faith like at an older age, or at a after you experienced a lot of life, or I guess it'd probably be very similar when you're younger. But like I feel it's just this way, right? Like, I mean, you just, I feel like that sheep that's lost, and it's clearly, I don't know. It's such I guess it's just so simple in my head. You know what I mean? And so it's just weird on how impactful it really is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, if you want to break it down into like non-shepherd point of view for someone who might not be like relating, it's like, okay, I'm a father of 3. If one of my children runs off in Target, I'm gonna leave my 2 with the cart and with my wife and go find my one child, right? And I will be rejoicing when I find my lost child. But it's just like,
she's over your
yeah, I'll put her over my shoulders, which I have had to do before with my crazy children. So. But yeah, it's great, and I didn't even know, like, really notice the larger like symbolism of him like leaving Samaria to go to Melech. I don't even know if that's like intended. I'm sure probably is, but like, that literally just popped in my head as you were talking about it. It's like, oh yeah, he's like, actually, we see him do it.
Yeah, it's really good writing in that way. Like I don't know, they're really working on the way that they're following the overall story and like connecting themes to it,
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, let's go to Melech then. So we see, we learn what the field, the planting of this field was for. John and Big James were working the field of this guy named Melech for him and his family, who are in desperate need. They've fallen on tough times. Fotina from, sure I'm mispronouncing that, but the lady from the well from the finale of season 1 had told Jesus about this guy and his family and how they're just really on tough times, need some help. So he has John and Big James plant this field, that will provide for generations, which is a point that they clearly miss, goes way over their heads. And we'll hear about that later towards the end. And on top of that, so like what I was saying before when I kind of jumped ahead of myself, Jesus has Big John and James, like, does Jesus have them do this, or do they kind of like take that upon themselves to like assign out basically the grocery list to the group? In the middle of the episode, all the disciples are in town and they're like, all right, we need you to go buy like 3 wineskins, and I need Matthew go get some pepper and onion and blah blah blah. Basically they're getting a bunch of food to have a big meal, and they aren't sure with who yet. And throughout the entire episode, they're talking about all the invitations that Jesus has. He has an invitation to meet with the high priest, invitation to meet with somebody in like a government structure. I forget exactly the title. He has an invitation to go to a leper colony. So they're kind of like talking about where they're going to go. And instead, they go to Melech's place. As the group's approaching the house, they pass the field that they were working and planting. Melech comes out and they have a conversation. And here's where John and James learn, much to their dismay, that they actually like worked this field for a Samaritan of all people. And Melech is like thankful, but he's telling Jesus and the group, he's like, look, there's nothing I can do to thank you for this. Like, I don't have money to pay you. I can't donate to your ministry.
And I sure as heck don't deserve it. That's what he
Yes.
says.
Yeah, I think that's a direct quote. And Jesus is like, no, that's okay. Like, there's only one thing I want or something. And he's like, basically like, I don't have anything that I can give you. Like, we don't even have like enough food for our family to eat, like, let alone like be able to give you anything.
Mhm.
And Jesus is like, yes, that's it. Let's have a meal. And he's like, I just told you we don't have any food or any money to buy food. And he's like, that's okay. And, you know, the group's, you know, got a bunch of supplies for a big feast there. So they share a meal, and you know, Jesus is talking to Melech and his wife, and there's two things that happen here. First is Melech's wife is basically like, you know, look, they say when the Messiah comes, like, I'm going to paraphrase, there will be like no sadness or like, you know,
Pain and suffering.
he'll like eradicate the pain and suffering. Like, if you're really who they say you are, like, why are we still suffering?
When is this happening?
Yes.
I can mark my
And what's he
calendar.
say? It's really good.
Well, yeah, I'll actually just tell you what he says. And well, I love it because when she says it, it's a bold question.
Yeah.
And this is where I was kind of referring to. I can't remember if it was take 1 or take 2 of our introduction that I was talking about this. But they're
still
just
sad about my Matthew joke, because that was funny, and no one is going to get to experience that.
They're just like they're so clueless to it, and like, which is great because I love it. You think that they know, but they don't, and they're at the edge of their seats right now. They're listening. They're quiet. Their jaw dropped. They're just, you know, like, she asked the question that they're all thinking, and they experienced him healing people, but like, in their eyes, like, I feel like from what I don't know if this is like creative liberties and all that, but like, at some point they're almost like growing numb to the fact like he's just healing that person. And in their eyes, it almost seems as though the way it's being portrayed here is like, all right, so when are we going to heal everything? You know, like, when is this, like, where's the horse? Where's the sword? Where is, like, when are you riding in on it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're still not picturing what he's here. And so
they're kind of like, it's cool that you're like, you know, that guy can walk now. That's great. But like, what about the Jews as a whole? Like, when are we going to get rid of these Romans? Like, when are we going to heal that suffering?
Yeah. And like, when is justice going to be done to these people that it's due? You know, like, we understand that like these people need to be healed. Like, that's great. And like, that's probably justice, or the fact that like they didn't really do anything that warranted them to, you know, other than like, I guess the Bible would call original sin, right? You know, I think that's the idea here. But like, it's just they're at the edge of their seats, and I love it because they're quiet. Everything shuts down. They all shut up, and they're all just waiting for his response. And what he takes a moment, he pauses, and he's just staring at him, like, you know, kind of like, I don't know, just like understanding where they're coming from. So he's just waiting, and he talks about the kingdom now. And so he's like, I'm here to preach the good news of the kingdom of heaven. You know, like, so he almost like gets away from that question for a moment, and he said sidesteps it in a way of like almost saying like you're missing the point, but like without saying it, which is, you know, but like, I'm here.
Classic Jesus.
Yeah, it's a kingdom. Well, I think at this point, like, I like this because he's not giving this parable right now. I mean, maybe he is to some extent, but it's like I think he's like, all right, I'm preaching the good news of the kingdom. It's a kingdom that's not of this world. and it's a kingdom that is coming here, you know. And so I feel like in that type of language, kingdom is like this, I don't know, like king, right? That means king is coming, you know, kingdom is led by some. So I just think that they're still probably not understanding it, but um sorrow and sighing will flee, he says it here. um but I will make an access for people. I will make it available, the kingdom available to the people, is what he's saying. And so, let's see. But this is my favorite. But this is my favorite part of it. But in this world, bones will break. Bones will still break, he says. And so he's like drawing this line, this distinct line between what they perceive as the kingdom that's coming and the actual, like he's drawing a line between their expectation and reality. You know what I mean? Like their expectation is this is happening, but the reality is like whether I'm here or not right now, whether the kingdom is here, like bones are still going to break. There's still going to be pain. Hearts are going to hurt. Death is going to occur, right? I mean, that's the thing that we all have to walk through. And like, I don't know. I think it's so good because she's fishing for this answer and he's here healing people, but the reality is like he's giving her the truth. I don't know, right? I'm ranting at this point, but like I think it's that distinction we all need to really think about. I mean, even like, you know, you get the well, why is if God exists, why is blah blah blah, fill in dots, why is this person suffering, why is this, and like nowhere in there it's saying that like there's not going to be right now, you know what I mean? Like it's just, I don't know, I really liked this scene. It was a good one. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, I like it. He's saying like, that kingdom is yet to come, but like once we get there, like that will be no more. I forget exactly how he says it, but leaves that off with like the hope of what's to come, which is really cool. And then that kind of like leads them into Melek's situation and story, right? He's like, speaking of broken bones, your leg looks to be in rough shape. Why don't you tell me what happened? And he's like, I love how this story unfolds. He's like, well, I fell off a horse. And he's like, oh, I didn't see a horse. He's like, well, it wasn't my horse.
A friend's horse.
He's like, yeah, that could be tricky. He's like, well, it wasn't my friend's horse. And at this point, like the wife takes the daughter in to go to bed or whatever.
You don't need to hear this.
Yeah. He's like, well, see, we couldn't find any work. There was a drought or something. So me and my buddy, who also was going through a real tough time, decided to rob somebody, because we need money to eat, right? So this guy came right along and we jumped out and pushed him off his horse or something. And he like fell and hit his head, and we're not quite sure what happened, but he looked like he was unconscious, but we just kind of left him there, and like we took his clothes and his money, and I jumped on his horse, and then like one thing led to another. I kind of fell off, and then like did this, and I had to like crawl on my elbows and arms all the way back here, and yeah, not good. But I loved what the story like evolved into, which is, Melek obviously being distraught over this man that he just kind of like left, right? It's by all accounts like he thinks that he killed this guy, and that wasn't the intention. So like I think he feels pretty bad about that. And Jesus is like, like it's okay, like somebody came by and helped him, like he didn't die. And Melek's like, wow, what do you mean? Like, how do you know? And he's like, just
I
trust me.
promise.
Like,
I know.
he didn't die.
Mhm.
And I don't know if like Melek like understands like that just
Oh no,
period.
he does. He just starts crying. He's emotional about it. He says, "I promise you, he's not dead." And like that instant, yeah, he's crying. I'm watching him
Yeah,
cry.
I know he's
He,
crying, but I wonder if he's
but
just crying at the like thought of somebody telling him that it's like okay, or if like he grasps that Jesus is who he says he is and knows like that this like actually knows that this guy's not dead. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Um like what do you think
I think
he
yeah, I because he kind of does the like double turn here, like the on the
what?
video you would have saw it. Yeah, you know, he does kind of give this like, like he's like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, no, I know, I promise you, he didn't die. And so
Yeah.
I think I think he knows, and I think he understands it, and I think he's starting to grasp it. I mean, especially after the kingdom um talk. And they started this scene out with them joking around about the miracles that Jesus did, the fish and all that
Mhm.
with Simon's boat. And so like even this, he says, believe my words, he's not, you know he didn't die. So
Yeah,
uh
what happened with the end of this conversation
yeah.
here?
And so he calls it, which is I like it because he meets him where he is. All right, so that's really it. This is we're going to put this back into the sheep perspective, right? And so
Mhm.
he's lost, and clearly you're seeing like he's lost it even at a deeper level, like a spiritual, like he's not just lost to society or anything. He's lost to his own perspective of himself and like the way he would be perceived by God, I guess you could say. And so he is so Jesus seeks out the lost sheep. He meets him where he is.
Mhm.
He comforts him. I mean, which is probably what you do with the sheep. You don't just rip him up and you probably pet him.
Just
You
throw him over the shoulder.
and so, but it's almost like at this point too, he's responding and saying like a call to action too. He's like, look, I found you. I'm bringing you back from
Mhm.
where you were just at. I'm pulling you in. And like he's saying, return to the town. He says, um, return to the town. Um, and,
Go to
you
the
know,
synagogue,
the synagogue. Yeah, that's what I couldn't think of the word.
read the Torah.
Yeah. And like renew yourself. Like this
Yeah.
is, like almost like, he's like sobbing at this point. And
He's
it's
like, I
like,
can't even read.
yeah,
It's like,
he,
just listen to someone read it then.
is that what he says?
Something like that. He's like,
Okay.
yeah, just like listen to a reading or something.
Yeah, I just think it's because at this point he's like repenting, and this is actually to the truth of what Jesus was getting at, is that the kingdom rejoices over one sinner who repents than the 99 who doesn't need repentance,
Mhm.
and so this is like that full blown like dude is repenting. He's literally talking to Jesus and confessing what he did. Probably is not. I'm assuming this is something that he walks around Samaria and it's like, drinking at the local tavern, and it's like, hey, this is I I think I might have killed a man. Like I
Yeah.
just don't think that's what
Yeah.
was. So this is probably something that is eating him alive. That he is probably at the point at which his wife was taking his daughter in. I think at that point he has never told anyone. So I
Mhm.
don't know. I just think it's like it's a repent and it's a call, like Jesus calls him to, okay, like you've repented, now like do something different, in the fact of like you repented, now turn 180 degree, which means repent, and act different, do something different than what you're doing. And so I really like that. I think they really hit that, like the show hit the head on the whole like repent, turn from your sins, and walk in the light. I don't know, like walk in a different direction. Like I don't know.
Yeah, and that's kind of like where the conversation ends. And Simon's like, maybe we should head back. It's getting late. I want to be kind of like traveling, and in these neck of the woods, being a bunch of Jews out here. And Jesus like, yeah, you're right. What does he say? It's not like we have a horse or something.
No, he said we never know what sort of men lay along the side of the road.
Yeah, I love it. And then of course, like when I first saw that, and even tonight, I was just like in my head, I was like, oh, too soon. And then Jesus is like, too soon? And I'm like, yes. Yeah, gotta love it. I love those little moments, those little funny moments. Actually, it's really funny at church this morning, it's Monday. Oh, that tells you how my Monday's been. I thought church was this morning. Church yesterday. It's funny, the pastor, the speaker, is a guest speaker. He actually like referenced The Chosen randomly. He was just talking about, I don't know, ever getting into like the word and stuff, of course. And he's like, has anyone seen The Chosen? He's like, I love that show because it like exactly what we've talked about, like just makes everything so relatable, and just like gives you that layer of like moments like this, like personality to Jesus, right? Like I'm sure he was a funny dude. I'm sure he was also a super serious dude, and I'm sure he was like a whole bunch of other things that we read about in the Bible. But it's so cool to like see Jesus crack a joke.
Yeah, it's almost like he's exactly who he needs to be to who needs it. Right, like, which is without changing who he is, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like he's forcing a joke or this, like, it's just, I don't know. I like Jesus didn't walk up to the leper and is like, knock knock. You know what I mean? Like, it's like he knows when to
so
be.
A Jew, a Samaritan, and a leper walk into a bar.
Right? Exactly. He's very he can read the room pretty well, which is something I don't. My like daughter's losing it, and I'm like throwing her up in the air,
Yeah, exactly. So they leave, and they arrive at, surprisingly, the residence of Fotina's current husband, the guy who she was trying to get to sign the divorce papers in the last episode. I only noticed because he has like a huge nose, like just that honker is out there, man. And I was like, oh yeah, that's the guy that she was trying to get to divorce her. Which is funny because you kind of see him as Jesus is giving the 99 for one lesson. He's kind of overlooking the crowd up there, like kind of on the balcony or roof or whatever. But yeah, they were brought there for lodging. Basically, he's like, I got like 5 rooms or something. But it's cool because the last time we saw him, he's like this curmudgeon-y, like super like mean, like grumpy old dude. And he even says like, which one of you is Jesus? Like, you even got me like pretending to be in a good mood to get around town so I could like hear what you're saying. And I don't know, so that was pretty cool. They go, he's like, but I think one of the rooms is haunted. And I thought this was also funny. And she's like, oh, I'll take that one.
Yes.
But yeah, so they go, they fall asleep, wake up the next morning, and well, the next scene is Melik is his family's woken up by him like screaming, right? And the
Jumping off
camera
the
zooms
bed.
out and he's like on the ground and his wife's jumping out of bed and his daughter's jumping out of bed and they're like, what? And he's like, my leg. And she's like, oh, what's wrong? And he's like, no. And he like gets up and
There's
he
no
just starts
pain.
jumping.
Yeah, they're all.
And everyone's freaking out because his leg is healed. And of course that's amazing. But then the next scene is Jesus like opens his eyes and he's just like chuckling, right? And
Smitten.
John wakes up and he's sleeping in the bed next to Jesus. And he's like, what? And he's like, oh, I just know a certain family who's having a pretty good morning this morning.
Mm-hmm.
John's like, last night? And Jesus is like, makes the walking motion on his hand. He's like, what? You could heal people and you're not even there?
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty funny. But in this scene, John and Big James are like, wow, that's crazy. And Jesus is like, yeah, man, it's, it's whatever. Someday, when I'm not even here, you guys will be able to do stuff like even better, like crazier than this.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, what? Wait, can you say that again? And yeah, so the next scene we get, they're kind of having breakfast in the morning. Jesus goes out for another one of his walks, right? And they're like, well, where are you gonna go? And he's like, I'm just gonna go out. And they're like, well, what if we can't find you? And he's just like, seek and you will find.
Well, they get up and they're like, you need protection. He's like, enough with the protection. I'll be fine. They're just doing their bouncer status.
Yeah, they just need that security. Mm-hmm. He leaves and Big John and James are like, all right, so this is what we're gonna do. We've drafted a schedule for the next month and here's where we're gonna go. And the rest of the group's mainly Simon's like, hey, well, what are you talking about? Like, who put you in charge? Of course, Simon would be upset about who's in charge. And they just have this argument about like, why do you think you're in charge? Well, Jesus, gave us this important job. And well, they continue to argue about like, should they have plans? Do they need to have plans? Like, can we just like follow Jesus like he asked us to? Or there's kind of like funny moment where they're like, all right, let's put it to a vote or whatever. And they vote and Thomas doesn't vote. And they're like, what do you think? He's like, no, I'm the new guy. Like, I'm staying out of this.
Because they're all being ridiculous and they're like planning out his every moment. And then they're getting upset because they're like, you lost him for a whole day as he got lost around town and you guys didn't do your job. And
so they're all upset. John and James, they kind of storm out and they're like, well, you know what? They said Jesus can make his own choices, right? So let's go ask him what he thinks. So they walk out, they wander out, they find Jesus. And they're standing there getting ready to ask him and talk to him. And a group of passerbys are like, hey, you. And they're like, hey, shalom. And they're like, you filthy Jews. But I don't know. Probably. Also out of context. Going to sound terrible. So please don't clip that part of the
episode. Well, yeah. So to give context, the Samaritans hate the Jews and are throwing rocks at them and screaming, "You filth!" Yeah, so
they're like, oh, you know how we say hello to Jews in these parts? They just like throw a bunch of rocks at them.
And they spit on them, and they're chuckling and laughing, and here you have the two,
John and James, just raring to get their justice, right? And Jesus is like holding them back, like telling them, like, no, like, no, like what
would this achieve?
Yeah, what good does that do? And it's hilarious because like as they leave, like James, I think it was James, he's like, yo, you So I muted my mic there. You just you said we'd have the authority to do these great things like you just say it like say the word and we'll like strike them with thunder. We'll rain fire down on them. Like you just say the word and Jesus like what?
They've, and incinerate them, fire from the heavens. He's like fire, and he's just kind of looking at them like,
Wow, that escalated quickly.
I do really like this scene though, because like I don't know, I was reflecting this. I was actually my infant daughter was calm enough to let me watch this as we were laying there, and
Nice.
I was thinking about how this scene reflects such a good role of leadership and like fatherhood and like of like Jesus being to them. Like he didn't just like snap at them and say like, you guys are being ridiculous. He kind of like sat with them in this, and it's like, you know what I mean, like, and it's like the father I want to be. Like when I look at this, like, because they're reacting to something, they're angry, they want to go incinerate these other people, and he is just kind of letting them come to their own conclusion, but like leading them there in such a good way. And it's like he's so gracious in it too, and like he's not like calling them out for this. He's like, he's just sitting with them, and I really like that. Do you get what I'm saying here? Like, you have more experience in fatherhood than I do. I have a 4-month-old that there's really no doing this.
Right. Yeah, as you're saying that, like I'm like, ouch, because I've been lately struggling with this with a particular one of my children. And this is a good reminder of like having to take that approach. She's not asking to rain fire down on her foes, but sometimes it feels like it. But yeah, that's a great point you brought up of just like the grace. I mean, he reprimands them and he's like,
but
basically like, you guys are kind of being dumb here, but like, can you just like take a step back and like look at what you just asked to do?
You just asked if we can incinerate people over this, and he brings up like, he's like, well, why did I have you do the physical labor? Was it? And they're kind of like, duh, I don't know, maybe because well, because we're doing good for people. And he's like, no, because what you're sowing here is seeds for generations. And so even
what's
what
he say? He says like, he's like, yeah, these Samaritans, like, look at how many people are like listening and following. And
they're not even
I have not done a single miracle here. They haven't seen anything. They're just following on my word. And like, yeah, and continue. I just thought that was
and it's like he's teaching them. Sorry, I had a really good thought. I'm like, I lost it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. It's all right.
I'm so sorry.
No, but it's like, so you're sowing these seeds. I'm trying to see if I can like rant long enough to pop in my head.
You know what? It'll pop in your head like 20 minutes after we stop recording.
Oh yeah, no, I'll be like laying in bed. I'll be like, darn it. No, but he's I'm getting there. I don't know. I just think that it's just so good because he's like, yeah, they're not even seeing miracles, and they're following me, and they're hearing these things, and it's like, you want to react towar's this, but like, I don't know. I can't remember.
You're basically gonna like ruin everything that we've like established so far. Yeah, and I don't know. It's just like, as you're trying to remember the brilliant point that I so rudely
No,
interrupted
stop.
and stole from the tip of your tongue. It's just so like cool to see like clearly John and James want justice to be served, but Jesus is like, no. Like we can
We're
serve
different.
justice in a different way,
Mhm.
not by smiting our foes, but like instead, basically like acts of kindness and love of like, we're planting that field, right? We're sowing seeds for generations to come. They're hearing my word that, at the last episode, I told Fatina that like the water I give, you'll never thirst again. Like
Mhm.
the food that I provide, you'll never hunger again. And like, you want to ruin that over like being spit on so you could
Mhm.
like smite your foe.
And he's sowing. I figured it. I remember what I don't know if it's not that like it's not that like revolutionary here, but um he's sowing seeds in them right now. So like with this, like it's yeah, I don't know. I really like what he's doing here because he's like, to recap, they flip out, they want to call fire. He doesn't react in a like, how dare you kind of thing. He lets them see how ridiculous they sound. He teaches them a lesson and is very truthful towards it. Like, here's what you're missing. Like, this little bit of information here is going to help you understand a little bit more, and you should think a little bit more about this. And then it's like he recognizes the, not shame, but he recognizes that they understand that they were wrong, and that they were and that, yeah, that they were wrong in that, you know what I mean? And realizing, like, they're starting to think of how it could be, they maybe could have reacted different, or starting to picture, like, see the bigger picture of it. And that's where he kind of he jokes around. He's like, you wanted to bring down fire to burn these people up, like that's what you wanted to do. And so I think that's funny. But he, at this point now, they realize that they were in the wrong, and he like comforts them, and that's what and he's like, all right, let's go, like, let's
Yeah.
turn around and let's walk back. He kind of sits up next to him, puts his arms around them, and walks. And it's just from start to finish,
Yeah.
it's so good of a good leader and a good father and a good whatever,
He like turns it into a joke too. He's like, you know
yeah.
what? I think I'm gonna call you guys the Sons of Thunder.
Yeah, and then lightens the mood with that. Yeah, yeah, like, and almost of like, hey, like, I forgive you for that. Like, you're good. Like, let's move past that. Like, you don't
Mhm.
have to sit in that. Like, let's come out of it. You
Yeah.
realize you did something wrong. You don't have to be shameful about it. Learn from it, and let's move on. And you're now called the Sons of Thunder.
Yeah.
Like, uh, which is actually, I think that's straight
It's out
from,
of the Bible. Yeah.
it's I looked at it, it's like Luke
Yeah.
9.
Talk about having your silly deed immortalized, right?
Mhm.
They are now known as the Sons of Thunder because they wanted to rain down fire on the Samaritans.
And that's the, that's John. I mean, that's the one Jesus loves the most.
Yeah,
So,
it's true. I like how they also reference that in the beginning
mhm.
with Mary's like, he loved all of you. He's like, yeah,
Yeah.
but
Uh,
I was in his inner circle. Like,
I wonder if the dynamic too. I was thinking about that in this episode. The dynamic between John and I want to. I want to re-go through the Gospels and see if I can pick up if there's any. I think it's in Acts you see John and Peter in a couple scenes, like of like at the temple they um, somebody's begging for money and he's like, well, I can't give you money, but what I can give you is you know from Jesus, like and that type of, and I think them, John and Peter were both walking. But like I wonder if how long it took them for the power struggle.
Oh yeah,
Like there had to have been a power struggle between the you got John, like Jesus loves me the most. And you
yeah.
got Simon is like, if you get in within 2 feet of Jesus, I'm punching you in the mouth. Like, it's like I just that dynamic. I wanna I think it's just I think
Yeah.
it's good. I think yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it continue to play out in the show too. 'Cause this season there's you see a lot of turmoil. Yeah, we'll go with that word. Within the group of the disciples. Just
Yeah.
like being humans trying to like
Well,
live
I,
in this concept of following the Messiah. But
I thought about it too. I can't remember where in the episode. I'd have to go in and I don't know. I can't remember exactly where it is. But there was a point at which like I don't think it was the breakfast when they were all there. I think when they were all like congregating at before heading to Melech's house, um they were all so awkward. And it makes sense that they would be awkward because like they're strangers to
right,
some
yeah, a lot
extent.
of
Like
them they like
it's like yeah, you ever go through like it's like you go to your first, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that relate to most people that be watching or listening, or you go to class for the first time, like you're
right.
school and you're sitting in the class. By the end of it, 16 weeks go by. You feel like you kind of know these people to some extent, but like, in the early on, they're like, all right, we're gonna split you into groups or anything like that. And you're like, I don't know this person.
Yeah.
It's awkward and you feel and
First day on the job,
yeah,
like you're like
first day on the job. Yeah, that's another one. And so there's just such like an awkward feel to it, and because there's no conflict that they've experienced together to kind of like you know get what I mean, to
yeah.
experience together, to problem solve together, to grow together. And like I mean, I guess fleeing Capernaum, but like I don't know, I just really liked I wonder how that had to have been intentional. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think these actors and actresses are like, you know, actually awkward in this
Yeah.
point. They
Yeah,
probably
no,
know each other pretty well,
I'm sure they focused on that because like the
Uh,
dynamic continues to play out this season of just like getting to know each other basically.
mhm.
They just happen to be doing it like in the midst of like maybe the greatest time of history with
Yeah.
like the
And
living God.
and I mean, you got to think too, like the last season, season one ended with like that like scene from The Hangover with
Yeah.
them like walking and like glass is coming down and they're all like, you know,
Yeah, exactly.
um,
But as they're kind of like walking away from the scene of the almost smiting, the high priest of
mhm,
Sakar comes out and he's to meet Jesus, and he invites Jesus to come to the synagogue to read a scroll, right? And
mhm.
so they go to the synagogue, and of course, like it's packed. We see Melech and his family come in, which is awesome. And Jesus goes back to the scroll room to pick a scroll, and he asks John to come back and help him, right? And he uses it almost like again as another teaching moment from the whole anger issue. He's like, how about the scroll where Moses broke the tablet or whatever. Like I forget the exact examples, but he's like,
And he
oh,
broke
what
the
about the one
tablet,
where
or
that guy got angry and did that? Or
when,
and
when
John's like, okay, I get
yeah,
it. Like,
when Moses struck the rock instead of speaking to it,
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah,
when Balaamul hit the donkey or something like that. I
yeah, yeah.
think that's a story of there's a story of a talking donkey in the Bible. don't know if you know that, but
I don't.
yeah, it's the whole Shrek thing. So
Donkey.
donkey.
Oh gosh.
But
Now I will never read it the same.
I'll have to dig that up for next
Yes.
time.
But yeah, so
Talking
then
donkey.
eventually they land on Genesis as we know it now.
Well, because they only have the first 5 books of Moses here, and that's it's yeah. I kind of was trying to understand what I mean. It probably just they're in because they're in Samaria, which is being like excluded from, you know, from they don't have the temple, they don't have like you know what I mean. It's very they're probably yeah they're just excluded from what I assume the Pharisees and Sadducees and
Yeah.
from the Jewish traditions. Because
Yeah.
Samaria, they're following the same God, they're doing the same things, but they're lacking the Jewish traditions that they built. I mean, we saw Samaria, the woman, she's at Jacob's well, which is from Genesis. So like it's it's yeah.
Yeah, and it's cool because like John's they're kind of like reciting the opening of the scroll, right? And then at the same time it's like intertwined with John writing the introduction to his book. And the parallels here are really good, I feel. You know, they talk about like in the beginning, the creation, like God created the heavens and all this stuff. And in John, he's talking about like in the beginning
Was the Word,
and the Word was God, and
the Word.
on and on. And just like the parallels between the two, I think are really cool. What did you kind of think about that whole dynamic there?
Oh no, I think it was just great. I mean, it's kind of like I don't know if again I keep on thinking back, was this take 1 or take 2 that we talked about this? But Matthew, I think it was take 1, how we talked about how Matthew writes
Yeah, the whole
oh,
joke.
that was your joke. That was your joke.
Well, like they joke about like the well, first Matthew starts out like in his account, he's like on the second day of the third week of the month of whatever at the second hour, and John's like, bro, we don't need like all of the like particulars, and Matthew's like, of course you do, why wouldn't you? And they then go on and joke about how John should start his book. He's, you know, Mary's throwing out all these ideas, and she's like, well, why don't you start with the lineage or whatever? And John's like, it's not a bad idea, but you know, Matthew will take care of that. Of course he would. And then that's of course leads into the start of Matthew, how it can kind of be a little bit of a drag to get into at first. It's a tough read, especially I think that like did you say that was like the first gospel that you read?
Yeah, I don't know if it was the first one I read.
It was the first one I read.
Well, Matthew, Mark, Luke, like so it's the first one. You think I'm going to read the first,
start,
in the New
start
Testament.
At the beginning.
Let's start. And so no, I think that was. I remember opening. I specifically remember opening it up. I remember struggling with the Old Testament because I'm like, I'm so far out of this context and this culture and this everything. I just was so lost the first time I read it or started to attempt it. Right. And then there were someone was just like, you just need to start with New Testament. So it's like, okay, fine. And then I jumped to Matthew and I'm like, what in the world? Like,
like 2 pages again, of so-and-so, the son of so-and-so.
And so, which is, I appreciate that because it's, you know, it needed to be said, right? It needed to be understood. I think it's, you know, I mean, we get these lineages, you know, and I think about the book of Ruth too, which is like talking about the lineage that led to King David, and then you get these lineages from like King David and on, and like so like it's the pieces of the puzzle that kind of go together, and so I appreciate it. But when you read the beginning of John, there's just something, well, it's poetic, right? It's
Yeah.
what he just did is he took the beginning of Genesis and fastened it in a way of like through a different lens. You know what I mean? You have Genesis being written from a point that like you don't know anything in the future. You know what I mean? You don't know all of this. You don't know these stories that are going to occur, these just, you know, the world, the timeline, the history. And then you get John, who's just clearly a deep thinker in this and is seeing a bigger picture kind of person. You have Matthew picking out every single detail, and it's like he's you know, got tunnel vision almost. I don't want to say that, but like he's not pointing this out in the way that John is. John's like kind of just taking these I love it so much. I love the way John starts, and I'm sure it's not my favorite gospel, but I think some of the lines in it are my favorite, which is, yeah. And does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm trying to find the line here in this scene where John and Jesus are choosing, because John references, he says like something about, in Greek they use word and it means this, and then that's when they start doing the like echoing of the reading of the first scroll, and then John writing the intro to his book, and he uses the word right. So I'm trying to figure out exactly what it's like, because I think there's a little importance
divine there. Yeah, it says that the Greeks use word as divine reason, and that's what he says. And so, you know, in Genesis you have Jesus speaking, or not God speaking things into existence. So it's like there's a divine reason in this, you know, and I think so he's correlating the two, you know, and almost like, I don't know, I'm sure there's deeper theological exegenic, I think that's the word, exegetically written things on I don't know, it's like some biblical scholar way of saying like you break the things down and you understand it. But I don't know. I just think that they're just correlated so good, and I just think that there's just a
well, even the detail in the editing, right? So I just paused it on them speaking that line. You know, the Greeks use word to describe divine reason, and as soon as that phrase happens, the scene switches to a side profile of older John sitting at the table at candlelight, and he smirks, like it's like he has that realization of how he's going to start his book right on that line. And just like the editing there is so good, like how they transition and cut to that short little clip of John in the future, and then it goes back and forth between them. Yeah, it's just really good.
Yeah, it is. I liked the way that they did this. And then when, you know, Jesus brings out the scroll of Moses, the first book, and
I love the big paperweight they have.
I think that's
it's like
pretty,
a really cool looking rock.
I think that's there's a word for it. I believe I cannot remember. I can't remember the words of there's the rock and the
little pointer thing.
Yeah, but that's when they go into this scene and they you know have Jesus reading a line, which is interesting. I want to do this on my own, but Jesus reads a line, and then it jumps to John reading that line
from his book.
And they're like correlating each line of almost like what they
Mhm.
mean, because I feel like, yeah, John, I mean, every bit of what he wrote there was intentional, you know?
Mm. Yeah, it's a really, really cool scene and a really great way to end this episode. And like we talked about before, man, I'm seeing that paperweight stone because I have the scene playing right now.
Mm-hmm.
It looks so cool. But just a perfect bow on the 99 for the one like parable that they show in this episode, because Melek walks in, sits down, Jesus sees him, he winks, and then he starts reading. And it's just like a cool like completion of that whole like concept, right? But yeah, Jesus starts, he says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then it goes to John, in the beginning was the Word, and the earth was void and without form. And the Word was with God. It's just like, yeah, the back and forth
Mm-hmm.
between these two readings. It's so great. I love it. But yeah, that's how the episode ends. It's just John finishing the introduction to his book. Got the classic gaze out the window, pan out.
Oh, and there's thunder and lightning. I didn't really
Yes.
pick up on that till now. Sons of Thunder.
Oh yeah. Hey.
Big James has been martyred.
Right.
John is just, yeah, I didn't pick up on that. I don't know if they meant, I'm assuming
I'm
they meant
sure they did.
that. Yeah, that's, but yeah, it's Sons of Thunder.
Good episode.
It was a good episode. I enjoyed it. I think it's one of those, it's a good episode for the first episode of the season, you know,
Oh yeah.
because we
Yeah.
are on season 2.
Great way to start the season. And again, like, not as important as the message, right? The content. But they just like they upped the production, right? Like just the crafting of the episode itself, the scenes that they used, how they tied these scenes together. The open was amazing. It's just like season 1 was good, but like those production elements and theatrical elements, they take them up a notch here in season 2, which makes me excited for season 3. But yeah, great episode. There's a lot to unpack there, and I think we recovered well, after the mishap of not recording the first 20
debacle
minutes.
of
Yes.
yeah.
Next week, I'll set up an alarm on my phone, just be like, remember to push record, you big doofus. And hopefully we won't have that happen again. But yeah, is there anything you wanna say before we wrap up here?
No, I think we're good. I think this was a good episode. I enjoyed everything. I enjoyed season 1. I'm excited for season 2, and I know there's a lot of talk about season 3 right now that'll be in theaters November 18th. So that's pretty excited. The first 2 episodes. I don't know what our plan will be, but I know we'll probably wait until probably at this rate, we'll be covering those in the new year.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Hopefully we can hopefully it will just line up perfectly where it'll release on streaming services as soon as we finish up. But if not, we'll figure it out so we can have new be covering the new episodes as they release, because that'll be fun. But yeah, check out James and all of his stuff over at thenerdybible.com. You can find all of his podcasting platforms straight from his website, which is really awesome. He also has some great blog posts up there, some cool stuff, and some exciting plans for the future. So make sure you frequent thenerdybible.com. You can check out showboysmedia.com. It was made by, there you go, pointed correctly. Not Bulbasaur, which is under my hand. But, James, Mr. James made our website, and he did a great job. Go check it out. Subscribe here on YouTube, Showboys Podcast. We also have Showboys Gaming for all of our gaming content, and Patreon and Discord and all that fun stuff. You can find all those links on our website. You can find all those links for James on thenerdybible.com. Thank you so much for listening. And if you want to hear what I thought was a really hysterical joke about the book of Matthew, stick around and I will tell you. But in the meantime, we'll see you next week. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, and bye.
Adios.
Okay, so I got to tell the joke because, like, I actually thought it was hilarious, and I made it. I feel like I made it up. So I feel like there was so much lost in that first 20 minutes that it's so sad, because there was some good stuff, there's some funny stuff, and then we had to like try to rehash that, which is always rough. But I can't, even if I retell it, it's not even going to be funny because it's
I don't even know
it's
how
not going
to
to come out natural. But
I
we were
don't know
talking
how you
about,
would-
you know, how Matthew gets off to a real slow start. You got like 4 chapters of lineage. Okay, maybe not, but like it feels like it might as well be like 5 pages of the lineage of Jesus. And I had the realization as we were talking about it that the book of Matthew is like the Bible equivalent of that one show that, you know, you just got to get through the first 3 episodes, and I'll tell you the rest. It's amazing. It's such a great show, but man, you just got to stick it out through those first 3 episodes. I promise. And it was really funny, and I think it would have landed great.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Had we been recording and I not had to like rehash and re-explain a joke.
Oh man. Well, you know, that's the breaks. I mean, I remember looking up and I'm like, there's no red dot. There should be a red dot. I know there should be a red dot. Something's off.
Yeah. Well, it's off now.